Okay. Uh, Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to whoever is joining us and watching. I am Hifza Perez, and we are back with the series of DSG, the webinar series. The basic purpose behind this webinar series is to create the awareness among the masses and participate towards giving something back to the mother nature. So, as we have already mentioned, that the topic today that we are going to discuss is the climate change and sustainable transition. The basic idea of climate change, that it's climate change, no doubt, is already happening. It's around everywhere, and we are the one who's causing it. We are the problem, actually. And currently, globally, it is one of the most lethal and crucial problem that we are facing right now. So we have an amazing, two amazing guests with us right now. And before I invite them, I would like to say that I'm really honored to host them, and I'm sure that we are going to get a lot of information and knowledge out of this session at the end of this session. So I won't be delaying, and I would like to invite the guest to the webinar. And Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Walaikum assalam. Hafsa. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, Tik Tak. How are
Walaikum
you?
Assalam.
So I'll give a little bit of the introduction myself. Then I would like कि आप खुद भी थोड़ा अपने बारे में बता दें, because you have such diverse background and such diverse expertise. I won't be able to explain it pretty much in detail. So starting with Hira. Hira is actually is currently leading the program and project department and team in Stimulus. And I think the core idea behind that is the sustainability and clean technology and innovation. And you have done a lot of work in the entrepreneurship department as well. So welcome to the webinar, Hira. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me here, Hafsa. And if just a very brief introduction. My firm Stimulus has been working in the sustainability space for the last 10 years, almost 12 years actually, to 2009. Say. And the idea is always to connect with the corporate sector and help them align their business strategy with their sustainability strategy, and talk about making it part and parcel of their entire business mandate. And in the last 10 years, I think only very recently this change has come in, where corporates are actually actively taking this on. And now we also have a new breed of entrepreneurs for the startup space or green tech, or जो technology पे काम कर रहे हैं, with a focus on green tech, because I guess younger people are much more aware than we used to be. So last 2018, so almost 5 years of हो गए, we've been working with these startups and SMEs and sort of helping them align, again, climate mandate, social impact within their own business strategy and proposition. So I guess, that's part of the work.
That's quite impressive right now. Welcome, Hassan. I'll give a little bit of introduction for you as well. First of all, I'm really impressed by the work that Pakistan Environmental Trust is doing. So Hassan currently is leading the as a program director of environmental energy and Pakistan Environmental Trust, and you have quite an extensive background regarding the policy analysis and the project making. So, and that specifically is related to energy and climate change. Do tell us something about your ventures and what Pakistan Environmental Trust is doing.
Great. Thank you, Hafsa. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel and working alongside Hira here. So really happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion we have today. So I am one of the program directors at the Pakistan Environment Trust, where I'm primarily leading our carbon pathways program. So a little bit about myself. So I have been involved in the energy access, climate finance space for more than a decade now. I started a lot of my work working with the UNEP in Geneva, as well as the government of California. And that was more of a policy analysis role, where we were sort of trying to create policies around how we can link carbon markets in different jurisdictions. I kind of moved down the ladder a bit after that, where I moved closer to project developers, where I worked with, again, energy access project developers, both in East Africa and China, again, on clean cooking and biogas digesters. My role was, again, to sort of, help them gain access to carbon finance to sort of scale up the projects. But eventually, sort of, I moved further down the ladder and closer to the grassroots, where I worked for about 4.5 years. I set up an agriculture waste to energy startup called Enmass Energy, which is based in the US, but we were sort of working on biomass-based power projects across different regions. Our primary focus was in Pakistan. So I worked quite a bit on, setting up a biomass supply chain obviously, due to various reasons which we sort of tend to face, that I think Hira is well aware of, that startups tend to face in Pakistan, kind of had to transition out of that. But great experience. And now, sort of, I am one of the program directors at PET. Organization itself is relative to say stimulus. I think it's very young. We've only been around for about 2.5 years now. And the main focus for the organization was to really harness climate finance for Pakistan, primarily given that Pakistan, even its vulnerabilities and the kind of opportunities we represent, we've so far been unable to leverage climate finance in any meaningful manner. And this is the whole reason for setting up this organization, to identify white spaces, to identify programs, identify areas where we can not only channel climate finance, but actually build and scale those programs up to make them more bankable, so they become investable propositions for climate finance entities. And we want to move beyond your traditional GCFs and your traditional multilaterals and move more into sort of sources of private capital, as well as private businesses that are going on that net zero transition globally. So as of now, I'm sure as you're aware, like, there are 3 programs that we have. One is the Carbon Pathways program, where we're sort of trying to set up a voluntary carbon market-based sort of projects and programs in Pakistan. Second is Net Zero Pakistan, which is again targeted towards helping local companies transition towards net zero. But the idea is to not just help them set those targets, but actually design the projects and implement those projects and bring in the financing necessary for that transition.
I
And the
guess
third
that's one
program,
of the biggest challenge. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And the third program that we have is more forward-looking. It's called Rewild Pakistan, where you've done the mitigation part aspect, but where do we want to go? What do we want to restore our ecosystems to? And that's where Rewild Pakistan comes in, where we're looking at sort of reintroducing species, building up entire ecosystems, and doing that again in a very sustainable manner, in a very financially sustainable manner. So that's the long and short of it. But again, happy to sort of delve further into sort of some of the experiences as we go on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hassan. Hearing the two talk about the actual implementation of how the climate change, how is it occurring? I'm currently like remembering the time when I started my master's, and I was looking that which degree should I opt for, and I looked for that degree of climate change and renewable energy. So बचपन से like science की books में भी we have heard the stories about global warming, greenhouse gases, climate change, but we never took it seriously. Like, I'll talk about myself as well. It was just the part of my curriculum that I had to pass and I had to learn about things, but I never thought about it. Okay, what it actually is, what harm is it causing around us, and how crucial it will be in the very immediate future. So when I started studying this degree, I started studying the concept of climate change, and then I got to know that it's not a fancy word of climate change. It's not just a statement that we use. It's actually a very big problem. So I wanted to as a concept of awareness, I wanted to initiate this webinar with the concept of climate change. So Hira, why don't you I want to talk about climate change, how crucial that is, how serious we should take it in our daily lives, in our corporate lives, and everywhere wherever we go, we have to take this seriously. So what's climate change actually?
So in the actual sense, since I am not, I feel I am more of a business person than a scientific person. And my education is, and all the work I've been doing also has been with business. So instead of delving into a more technical explanation of what climate change is, if I look at it practically, so every single day I live in Karachi, right? And I look at how the weather in Karachi has changed over the years. We no longer have a winter season, right? It's summer. It's summer 12 months a year, and this year the summer was so intense. And at the same time, while Karachi was burning away, the rest of the Sindh province was actually flooded with more than torrential rainfall. And I forget the statistics right now, but I think it has not rained as much in the country in the last 100 years or so. So and it was so intense that we weren't able to bear with the flooding that resulted from it. And obviously, this is a natural calamity where you have intense heat and then intense rain. But the impact of this is on people's life, how people live, how they're affected financially. They've lost their homes. The health, rehabilitating them. In fact, I think one statistic in the Sindh was that almost 70,000 women needed access to maternal health care that they were not being able to get because of the flooding, right? So climate change in a broad scope is not just the changing weather patterns. It's also the change in the impact on our quality of life, and how it affects us personally, individually. But then, if I look at it from a business point of view, people who are working in factories, people who are working in high risk industries, for them, the quality of the product that they're making, or even the working scenarios that they're working in, all of these change significantly because of the disturbance in the balance of nature, right? And that really
Definitely.
is like my understanding of what climate change is.
I think even if we talk about the current scenario, it's like 8th of October right now. If I would go back to my school time or college time, this 8th of October would be very cold. तो अब तो ऐसे है कि वी आर स्टिल लुकिंग कि कहीं से कोल्ड ब्रीज ऐसी वो आ जाए जिससे हमें पता लगे कि विंटर्स आर क्लोज टू अस. सो आई थिंक दैट्स वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट हमारे पास जो नज़र आ रहा है सिनेरियो ऑफ द क्लाइमेट चेंज, दैट्स एक्चुअली द बिगेस्ट साइन कि क्लाइमेट इज चेंजिंग एंड इट्स कंटिन्यूसली चेंजिंग एवरी ईयर, द पैटर्न इज शिफ्टिंग. Okay, so I'll come towards you, Hassan. You told us about the Pakistan Environmental Trust, that you are working in the net zero Pakistan and resilience towards having a sustainable Pakistan and low carbon. So I would like कि हम थोड़ा सा global carbon के बारे में और carbon footprint के बारे में थोड़ा सा discuss करें कि what it actually is and what participation it has or what contribution it has towards our overall environment.
Absolutely. No, I think, and building on from Hira's point, right? Some really pertinent points that she hit upon. I think, particularly from the business aspect and how it affects our daily lives. Because I mean, जब तक हम theoretical या scientific sense में बात करते रहेंगे, then it doesn't really translate. We have to talk about
Definitely, definitely.
कि हमारी डे टू डे लाइफ पे क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है, हमारी रोजी रोटी पे
बिल्कुल.
क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है, हमारी बिजनेसेस पे क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है. आई थिंक दैट इज वेयर वी हैव टू रियली सॉर्ट ऑफ टेक द कन्वर्सेशन. अब हो ही रहा है वो, तो हमने करें ना करें बात, इट्स ऑलरेडी इम्पैक्टिंग अस most and we're right at the forefront of it. And I think like that's where I wanted to sort of take the conversation in a direction where Hera was alluding to in terms of businesses and how it's impacting that. Because globally भी अगर हम देखते हैं तो हम अक्सर ये बात हो रही होती है हमारे यहाँ पाकिस्तान में भी कि we are not responsible for climate change. So इसलिए जो है वो हमें तो मुल्कों को reparations देनी चाहिए, हमें help करना चाहिए. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, while we may not be responsible, we are still facing the brunt of it. And if we continue to have the same messaging, तो हम disaster की तरफ ही जाते जाएंगे. Because Pakistan at the end of the day is one cog in the wheel that is the world right now, and the world is
Okay.
transitioning. If you look at it
Absolutely.
globally, आपके जो सब Fortune 500 companies में से a large proportion either have already sustainability reports or they have actual decarbonization plans in place. The likes of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Procter and Gamble, Unilever, आप name करें brand, Coca-Cola जो पाकिस्तान में हैं, they are all going towards a net zero transition. All your textile sector industries, your H&Ms, your Zara, the Inditex of the world, उन्होंने commit कर दिया है not just towards net zero but actually पूरे decarbonization plans बना रहे हैं. वो कैसे अपना carbon footprint कम करें, क्योंकि उनके ऊपर उनके शेयर होल्डर्स, उनके कंज्यूमर्स का प्रेशर है. गवर्नमेंट्स तो एक तरफ, उनके जो लोकल जो उनके बायर्स हैं, कंज्यूमर्स हैं, दे आर पुटिंग द प्रेशर ऑन देम. एंड व्हाट डज दैट रियली मीन? सो ये जो सारी कंपनीज हैं, इन सब की जो सप्लाई चेन्स हैं, जो उनके रॉ मटेरियल्स वगैरह हैं, वो पाकिस्तान जैसे मुल्कों में से ही आते हैं. पाकिस्तान, इंडिया, बांग्लादेश, वियतनाम, चाइना. एंड जब ये सारी कंपनीज नेट जीरो जाएंगी, अपना कार्बन फुटप्रिंट कम करेंगी, तो दैट मीन्स कि इनकी पूरी सप्लाई चेन्स हैव टू ट्रांजिशन आउट to net zero as well. They all have to go to sort of become decarbonized. अब इस पॉइंट में मैं आपको एक स्टडी कोट करता हूँ जो कि McKinsey ने की थी just last year, also coincided with the COP as well. And that study basically looked at 70 countries, 70 of the largest economies globally and regionally, right? And what that study came up with, और उसका जो मकसद था वो देखने का था, ये था कि जैसे दुनिया जो है वो ट्रांजिशन कर रही है नेट जीरो की तरफ, उसका डिफरेंट इकोनॉमीज पे क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ रहा है. And when that country sort of that study looked at was Pakistan was going to be the most affected country economy, even more so than countries like Nigeria, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, all of these countries. And the primary reason was that number one, एक तो supply chain disruptions बहुत होंगी हमारे यहाँ, क्योंकि climate change आ रहा है, हमारी जैसे अभी cotton crop destroy हो गई है, हमारे और भी crops पे फर्क पड़ेगा. Second, जो उसका reason ये था कि not just because of climate change की वजह से supply chain disruptions होंगी, but also because हमारी जो इकोनॉमी है, जो हमारी जो इंडस्ट्री है, it is actually quite heavily dependent on fossil fuel sources. So it has a very large carbon footprint. and
Yeah.
because of that we will get left out. दुनिया ट्रांजिशन कर रही होगी, हम अभी भी अपने करंट ट्रेंड्स और प्रैक्टिसेस पे चल रहे होंगे और we'll get left out. So not only are we going to get affected by climate change जो हो रहा है पाकिस्तान, बल्कि जो हमारी इकोनॉमी है, जो हमारी जॉब्स हैं, जो कि अभी हेवीली डिपेंडेंट हैं ऐसी इंडस्ट्रीज पे जो फॉसिल फ्यूल रिलायंट है. एंड इसमें अगर हम एक्सपोर्ट पे बात करते हैं तो अगेन हमारी जो एक्सपोर्ट बेस है दैट इज वेरी अनडाइवर्सिफाइड. या तो हमारी टेक्सटाइल्स जो हैं वो 60% ऑफ आवर एक्सपोर्ट्स हैं, एंड देन the remainder is your agri and quite undiversified exports. Again, those are all going to get impacted by climate change. So as a
Yeah.
result, आप दो तरह से डिजास्टर को देख रहे हैं, एक तो जो climatic disasters होंगे and then economic disasters, right?
बिल्कुल.
Which is why it becomes very pertinent for us to look at as an issue that we have to address locally.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
add,
जी जी.
sorry, I'm trying to add something to what Hassan is saying. And in addition to the supply chain context of this, our economy is very heavily driven by textile, agriculture, dairy, for example, right? And हमारे वहाँ for even up till a very long time, businesses के साथ एक misconception when we're working with them. When we talk about carbon and carbon footprint, they sort of forget to factor in that it's actually GHG emissions that we're talking about, and
बिल्कुल.
not just carbon dioxide, right, or carbon. So with the GHG emissions, a very big driver for us in agri waste and from dairy farming is ammonia, जिसको हम consider ही नहीं करते. So हमारे जो related solutions या जिस तरफ हम अपनी energies channelize कर रहे हैं towards sustainability या is mostly still towards sort of हम clean energy से production कर लें अपनी, as opposed to maybe thinking about what could be possible carbon capture or other elements to reduce these or work holistically on greenhouse gas emissions and not just on carbon emissions. So I think that's just one point that I wanted to sort of add. कि हमारी understanding in that context on a technical front, we still desires much more to understand and discuss these issues.
Yeah, like you talk about the GHGs, the greenhouse gases, it's not only carbon that's the culprit. There are a lot of other gases. We have the methane, we have the nitrous oxide, we have carbon dioxide, we have ozone that's continuously causing the harm to the environment. And it's not only the concept of environment, it's the biodiversity as well that's been affected. हम चाहे अब वो इंसानी जान हो, even if you talk about the so many species of animals that are being extinct now, why is that? It's only because of the climate change. They are not given the ecosystem that's mandatory for their livelihood and that's mandatory for their survival. So I guess it's not only the environment, it's all of the living beings that are being affected. So yeah, that's a very basic point. It's not only the carbon footprint, it's the all other greenhouse gases as well, जिनकी वजह से हमारा environment, हमारा atmosphere, हमारा livelihood, हमारे ecosystem, everything is getting disturbed. And it's the time is not that far that it is going to be very disastrous for every living being on this earth to survive with dignity, actually. So moving towards the idea of climate change, and I would like to shift this concept, shift this idea to the basic idea of sustainability as well. हिरा आप भी sustainability पे काम कर रहे हैं, वैसे पाकिस्तान Environmental Trust भी sustainability पे काम कर रहे हैं. The basic idea of renewable energy is to create the sustainable source of energy as well. बहुत सी ऐसी हमारी in the world there are many huge I'll say celebrities, there are many people who do not believe that climate change is real. I want the name right here, but there are a lot of people who do not actually believe that climate change is real. और अगर मैं underdeveloped countries की बात करूँगी तो even in Pakistan I think we believe that we are not the major contributors of climate change, but at the same time जैसे हसन ने कहा था कि we are suffering it, and it's not only us, it's everywhere, every person around the whole globe who is suffering through it. So sustainability is that concept जो कि we cannot throw it anywhere else के developed countries या industries only, or although industries are the biggest consumers of fossil fuels, but I think sustainability is that concept जिसको every person can induce in their daily life. उसकी implementation daily life में हर बंदे की जिंदगी में the lifestyle, a short lifestyle change के साथ भी हो सकती है. So what's your thought process of how to initiate sustainability है कहाँ? How do we initiate it? Where do we start?
You want Hassan to go first, or should I go first?
Please go ahead, please.
So it depends really, but I think one major concern, like Hassan mentioned, कि we're at the receiving end of a lot of global disasters and change जो शायद हमने खुद create नहीं किए हैं but हमारे ऊपर we experience them because we're part of the supply chains, we're part of the delivery end, right? And that also brings us to the fact that हमारी शायद इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन एज अ कंट्री या पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी इस तरह की नहीं है कि हम बहुत मैसिव और ड्रास्टिक चीज़ें कर सकें. तो फॉर एग्जांपल आपने अभी रिसेंटली ये पढ़ा होगा कि द कंट्रीज दैट आर एक्चुअली or Denmark has become the first country that has agreed to pay a tax to mitigate the climate change challenges, right? So we don't have that kind of wealth. We also don't have that kind of technical knowledge. So we really need to become creative about what we're doing. And understand first and foremost कि हमारे context में हम किस तरह से sustainability को लेकर आ सकते हैं. The very basic or the layman sort of understanding of this from many years ago is that या तो हम अपनी resources इस तरह से इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं कि we are leaving something behind for the future generations, but it's not possible really. So within that context हम जो हमारी economic bottom line है for a business or an individual, मैं अपने पैसे कैसे कमाता हूँ, कैसे खर्च करता हूँ, that needs to address. Can I move to a more responsible pattern of consumption? Can I choose to buy product that is more sustainable? Can I choose to implement certain design practices in my business जिससे मेरा product बेहतर बनेगा? Which also means that the cost of making and using that product or service will go up. So in that context to balance out करती हैं इसको चीज़ें, फिर वो मेरा social और climate impact है. And one basic mindset, sustainability is always about the long term. So the difference that I generally see with people, whether individual or business in Pakistan, is हमारा थोड़ा सा short term mindset है. हम ये सोचते हैं कि हम आज 2 रुपए कैसे बचा सकते हैं या हम आज क्या चीज़ अपने लिए within the next 1 week बेहतर कर सकते हैं. But if we try to incorporate that long term thinking, it's not today, but if I put up that solar system today, it would mean that it's upfront the same as my paying 12 months of electricity bill, but in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, what is the output I would get? I would have significantly reduced or zero electricity bill. So am I willing to take that trade-off? That mindset I feel is थोड़ा सा अगर हमारी communities में change हो, even थोड़ा सा, we'd be able to have a more sustainable approach to personal as well as business kind of an outcome.
Definitely.
No,
जी हसन.
100%. I agree with sort of Hira. I think it's a shift in mindset, right? I think like Hira rightly pointed out कि हमारे पास तो जो issue ये है कि countries like Denmark या Japan की तरह we can't implement a carbon tax or implement a carbon market locally, right? I mean those are things that पहले ही businesses के ऊपर pressure है, individuals के ऊपर pressure है, आप एक और additional चीज लें, that just adds a further layer of difficulty for them. But then on the other hand, what I do see is that we need to start sort of taking things from a scarcity lens as well. पानी का जो एक बहुत बड़ा issue है वो it continues to be there. Even if we don't look at sort of taxing water, perhaps, but we have to look at how can we efficiently allocate it. The fact of the matter is कि हमारे यहाँ पानी waste भी होता है without any dams, without any storage being built in place. We are still wasting a lot of water in Pakistan, and not at the domestic household level, but in the agri sector. As well as the industrial sector as well, where recycling and other practices need to be put in place. जहाँ हम एक scarce resource को scarce resource की तरह treat करें. I mean, we've kind of experienced that with natural gas, where we thought कि ये कभी run out नहीं करेगी पाकिस्तान में, and where there was a glut with CNG stations and everyone converting their cars to CNG, and all of a sudden you kind of realize it's running out. And that's what's going to is happening with water as well. So एक तो aspect ये है कि जिसको हम policy lens से तो change कर सकते हैं, I mean from a policy perspective. But then on the other hand, I think to Hera's point as well, I also want our industries to be a bit more forward thinking as well and see this as an opportunity actually, because जो मैं बात कर रहा था पहले कि जैसा ग्लोबली ट्रांजिशन कर रही है दुनिया अभी नेट जीरो की तरफ, अभी भी वो ट्रांजिशन फेज में है. द वर्ल्ड हैजंट फुली गॉन एंड मैच्योर हो गई है एंड वी आर बिहाइंड द 8 ball. We are actually in that point where we can be in front of the 8 ball as well. Pakistan का जो grid है, it is still, despite its problems, it is still quite clean compared to regional grids. हमारा 58% ही है जो fossil fuel based है compared to I think India's, which is 72% fossil fuel based. So we are already sort of in that position where we can cater to global demand as well and get in that global supply chain. So अगर हम अपनी जो agri practices हैं, which are already not the greatest in the world, right? If we can bring them to the point where जिस तरह हिरा ने कहा कि अगर हम जो है अपना यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ थिंग्स लाइक ऑर्गेनिक फर्टिलाइजर, reduced sort of water consumption, we kind of bring down the footprint of our agriculture sector, which is good for us from a climate adaptation perspective, from a cost perspective. But then it also means that our agri sector, it becomes cleaner, which means that there is an opportunity to then charge a premium to global brands. Similarly, अगर हमारी industries जो हैं, we take all of these initiatives, whether it's water recycling, whether it's sort of more or a greater transition towards renewable energy or energy efficiency, we will then be again in a relative position of advantage compared to our regional competitors, where हम जो हैं वो ना सिर्फ climate change के को adapt कर रहे हैं, but then we're also doing it in a business friendly way, where we are diversifying our export base, and this is also then an opportunity going forward for local startups as well, because I think a large aspect of this is going to be based on tech. So with Pakistan, a major challenge that we faced is कि हम बात करते हैं debt for nature swaps की, कि how can we get more financing, and because under the previous administration, forestation was a big drive, right? हमने
Yeah.
इतने दरख्त लगाए, and we've done so much to develop carbon sinks in Pakistan, but then we're not getting enough credit, we're not getting funding for it in the form of carbon credits or whatnot. And a major factor we weren't able to do that was because reporting ki kami thi. We didn't have the data, we didn't have the information to actually कैप्चर कि कितने कार्बन सिंक्स हमने बनाए हैं, कितना ज्यादा सॉइल को हमने रिस्टोर किया है, कितने इकोसिस्टम्स को हमने रिस्टोर किया है, कितनी बायोडाइवर्सिटी वापस आई, उसका क्लाइमेट चेंज और उसका जो है लोकल जो क्लाइमेटिक इंटरेक्शन का क्या इम्पैक्ट आ रहा है. And that is where I personally feel that जो हमारा tech sector है, that can take a lead with that, because with things like remote sensing, we already have startups working on this right now in the farming sector that are working on how to enhance the efficiency in the agriculture sector. If we start sort of taking a lead on that front already right now, that would allow us to not become a regional but a global leader in the sustainability space as well, because this space is ripe for someone to really become the market leader, and right now no one is really sort of at the forefront, and which will allow Pakistan an advantage to sort of get into it. हमने बाकी revolution जो IT revolution थी, शायद we've been on the back, just a back tail पे, but as we go towards sustainability, we can use the tech कि जो हमारी अभी growth हुई है to take advantage in this space as well.
They are all the drivers that you're talking about, the main drivers of change towards sustainability. Before moving towards the innovation and technology points, I noticed that there are very small points, one that Hira mentioned and one that Hassan mentioned, that they're very basic layman points that, for example, the idea of conservation and the idea of 3 Rs, the recycle, reuse, that concept can be implemented by each and every person of us. It's a small lifestyle mindset. It's a small lifestyle change. Hum continuously, whenever we are talking about the future for our future generation, we are always talking about, or we are always thinking, कि how can we participate कि हमारी coming generation के पास ये वाला घर भी हो, ये वाली facility भी हो, that it would be easier for our coming generation to live a better lifestyle than us. But we never thought about the environment that we are leaving behind for our future generation. I think that's part of our investment as well, and that's a very generic idea that we should have in mind. कि just like the other facilities, just like the other lifestyle that we are setting up for our future generation, we have to set up a clean environment as well. Hira talked about a very small idea of a bigger picture. It's not a small picture. It's not an overnight concept. It's not a short-term goal. It's a very bigger picture. If we start today, we are going to see the result like after a decade or after like 15 years or 20 years. We will be seeing the very major and visible difference that we are doing whatever we are doing right now. तो हमें उसका सिला या हम उसका return after 10 or 15 years बाद ही मिलेगा, because the havoc, that disasters that we are seeing right now, ये आजकल में नहीं हुआ. It started like a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago. It all started that, और अब वो इतना ज़्यादा accumulate हो गया कि we get to see the real changes that we have caused ourselves. Then we obviously I'll move towards the idea of adaptation and mitigation. जैसे हसन ने एक जुमला बोला था कि दुनिया ट्रांजिशन की तरफ जा रही है लेकिन हम यहीं बैठे हैं. So unless we understand the concept of adaptation and mitigation, we won't be able to do anything else. So what's the difference between the idea of adaptation and mitigation, Hira? How do you see it implementing in our lives?
So, yeah, if I were to look at it, mitigation is very simply हम already चीज़ें हो गई हैं, हम उनको किस तरह से improve कर सकते हैं. Very simple ways, right? We're already producing energy on coal or oil. How can we change that and produce on solar to get clean energy, for example? तो उसको हमें कम किस सो एग्जिस्टिंग जो challenges हैं उनको हम किस तरह से reduce कर सकते हैं. Adaptation is a slightly more long-term approach where we're also looking at कि future में हम किस तरह से improve. So let's say mitigation is prevention and adaptation would be precaution, right? So, and then adaptation is more focused on our natural resources, our indigenous resources, where we're not necessarily introducing new technologies. But let's take a look at इस वक्त currently हमारे पास tree plantation कितना cover है, हम उसको किस तरह से increase कर सकते हैं, जो बहुत बड़ी drive with Clean Green Pakistan was initiated in the last with the last government, and I think that was an amazing project to work on. But other things as well, हमें पता है इस वक्त मेरा एग्जिस्टिंग वाटर पाथवे इस तरह का है कि उससे कम्युनिटीज मेरी इफेक्ट होंगी. जरा सा भी पानी का बैलेंस ऊपर नीचे होता है, फॉर एग्जांपल ड्यूरिंग रेन और फ्लडिंग, how can I create alternative pathways or maybe even simply change the direction of that river? It's not impossible. दुनिया भर में हुई है इस तरह की बहुत बेसिक सी चीजें कि अगर हम फ्लो ऑफ द वाटर को लेफ्ट बैंक की तरफ लेफ्ट बैंक के बजाय राइट बैंक पे डाल दें, saves us a lot of destruction, also gives us more access to agriculture land, for example, for future use, right? So it's small things like that. But the point is, one, I do need to think about कि मेरे resources में क्या possible है. Mitigation means cost, technology, investment, maybe resources I don't have. Adaptation means थोड़ा सा mindset मुझे change करना होगा, थोड़ा नहीं बहुत ज़्यादा. But then again, we're heavily driven on. We have a lot of land and a lot of access to natural resources. Why not use that? And create those. Again, coming back to the point, it requires a lot of creativity. Instead of nahi ho sakta, what all can we do? And we have some great technology ki hum baat kar rahe hain. So young people, startups are trying to come into this space, and a lot of them have actually stuck through all of these challenges. But at the end of the day, it requires a lot more engagement from stakeholders. So it's not just a business venture or a big business or a startup that's going to be doing this, but like for example, some of the projects that engage the government also to be more active, engage other players to bring in the finance relative to, and so people like Pakistan Environment Trust and Stimulus and DSG to actually work together, with the communities as well to really make all of those adaptation mitigation efforts that we want to do possible. So yeah, that's my take on this.
Yeah, Hassan, over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that was quite well put. I think मुझे पहले example याद आता है. So 2011 में was pretty much the first time when I was able to really understand what climate change means, or how not. I mean, I understood it before as well, but how drastic its impacts are going to be. And this was I was in a lecture, and the lecture was being given by UNEP के ex-director who was kind of thrown out of the system because his views were considered too radical at the time. और उन्होंने ये कहा था कि everyone was talking about how we should focus on mitigation and be under control and whatnot. And his view was कि देखो, climate change is like a runaway train right now, and mitigation for us is right now कि we can slow this runaway train, right? कि आहिस्ता तो उसे कर सकते हैं, but it's going to crash. And that's how he viewed sort of climate change is happening. And he said now we have to just put more of our energies into adapting to it now. Is कि हमने करना क्या है crash के बाद, बजाय ये कि हम अभी सिर्फ mitigation की बात करते हैं. And I think that was very important because हमने उस वक्त शायद उस बात को इतना internalize नहीं किया. We kind of threw it off. But a country like Pakistan is very difficult, primarily because हमारे हाथ में नहीं है लगाम इस train की. It's a global phenomenon. It's very difficult for us to sort of work on mitigation. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't work on it, right? It means that we should need to sort of slow down this sort of process. We need to sort of take measures to be able to slow it down. But eventually, where like Hira put it, I think the resources also need to go towards adaptation now, primarily because that is what is going to happen. जो हमारा जो glacial जो flow है हमारा, that's considered the third largest sort of glacial region in the world, right? After the poles, this region that we have right now, this is the third largest source of glacial flows globally. So it's called the third pole, right? Colloquially, but it's expected at the current rate of GHG emissions, at the current rate of global warming and climate change, by 2100, by the end of the century, not even 2100, our glacial flows will go down by more than 50%, which means कि जो अभी हमारा क्वांटम जिसके ऊपर हम लड़ रहे होते हैं कि पानी कम है, तो सोचें वो 50% और रिड्यूस हो जाएगा तो क्या होगा?
It's
So which is
quite scary. Yeah.
exactly right. So just from that lens, that is why there needs to be a change in mindset where we need to start thinking things कि यार ये जो है हमारे पास और जो होने वाला है, we need to sort of adapt to it now. पानी को कैसे कम यूटिलाइज करना है, जैसे हिरा ने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा कि even with this floods, एक तरफ आपका जो है वो तरबेला से आपके फ्लोज बहुत तेजी से निकल रहे हैं और मांगला जो है वो आपका ऑलमोस्ट हाफ फुल था, ठीक है, एंड यू हैव द रिसोर्सेज टू बी एबल टू डाइवर्ट वाटर फ्रॉम वन सॉर्ट ऑफ canal system to the other, but for lack of planning or coordination or what have you, we weren't able to do that, right? Which would have reduced the destruction that we saw.
Yeah.
So the thing is that needs to be sort of look at how do we become more resilient, how do we become how do we adapt our agriculture, our industries, our communities to sort of commit to climate. Because mitigation is massive, requires a lot of investment, which we are trying to do, but then requires like a lot of global coordination, which as of right now is not really there, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, I think that's where I see sort of the transition going now for Pakistan anyway.
Yeah, it's transition की बात करें तो I think adaptation is something a part of our everything we have in life. हम adaptation की बात कर रहे होते हैं. Even if we are talking about the general idea, I think the girls would understand it better कि we have made use of the sunblock in our daily lives. Why? Because we know that that's because of the ozone that's around us कि the UV rays are causing that much harm to our skin. तो हमें पता है कि हमने sunblock daily basis पे लगाना है तो it is going to save our skin. So just like that, adaptation is that point of view that whatever has happened, we cannot undo it, but we can do something about it. It does not cause that much harm that it's currently giving us and that's currently causing. We can do something about it. Then obviously mitigation comes as a very long term planning, और हम future के बारे में सोचते हैं कि what can we do to stop it. So considering all of that discussion, I would like to talk about the challenges that we are facing right now as well. Understanding the basic idea behind the climate change, understanding the calamities and disasters, and even witnessing the major natural disasters जो कि हमारे अपने पाकिस्तान में continuously आते जा रहे हैं. The frequency is so high, it's so intense. We can see it and we are denying it. I think intentionally we are just keeping our eyes closed. So what are the actual challenges that we are facing कि हम क्या face कर रहे हैं कि जिसकी वजह से we are not acting the way we should act right now? Jihira.
I think it's a very long and that conversation can go anyway.
It's quite
but the thing is that I personally, and then there's a personal thing कि दो चीजें जो मुझे बहुत challenging लगती हैं in our country. One, we think about ourselves first as individuals before thinking about the communities, whereas हमारा total scope, अगर if I go to the bottom line कि हमारा मुल्क जो है वो religious basis के ऊपर create किया गया था. Religion is all about community. So this is a big disparity. ये हम आधी चीजों में वो एक influence पे जाते हैं, but at the end of the day we end up thinking about the individual self first. So that is something that needs to be sorted out. In Sindh, for example, right now अभी जो floods आए हैं, so one part is रेन ज्यादा थी, उसको हम कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते, ठीक है. इट्स अ नेचुरल फिनोमेना. यस, इट्स कॉज्ड बिकॉज ऑफ द क्लाइमेट चेंज, बट आई कांट कंट्रोल हाउ मच वाटर इज कमिंग आउट ऑफ द स्काई. कैन आई डू समथिंग ऑन द ग्राउंड कि इस पानी को हम बेहतर मैनेज कर सके? इतनी डिस्ट्रक्शन हुई, बट इन ऑल ऑफ दिस टाइम we were not able to put up but you know how we took COVID very seriously, and at least 3 startups in Pakistan created those वो क्या कहते हैं pace ventilators. Yeah, so at least 3 startups were able to create those ventilators within a very short span of time. But knowing that हमारे हर 10 साल से बारिश आती है, हमने आज तक कोई सिस्टम क्रिएट नहीं किया है कि पानी हम किस तरह से कलेक्ट कर सकते हैं या किस तरह से डाइवर्ट कर सकते हैं कि हमारी ज़मीनें सेफ रहें, लोगों की कम्युनिटीज डिस्ट्रॉय ना हो. But sure, we've lacked out at that element. I know that now people are actively trying to think about it. There are a lot of young startups based out of universities and Sindh interior जो देख रहे हैं चीज़ों को. They are working on different projects that could eventually be commercialized and actually help the communities. But one really massive challenge in at least in Sindh this time was that a lot of the larger landlords who had access to money and facilities, they actually made sure that their land and their ज़मीन उनकी घर उनके सेफ रहें और जो सारा पानी था वो गरीब कम्युनिटीज़ की तरफ डाइवर्ट हो जाए. So these issues, again, it comes down to how can we get those active committees, how can we all come together, work together, because karne ko bahut hai. Hassan said there's opportunity, there is a lot of opportunity, and it's not just opportunity to be successful, there's a lot of opportunity to generate wealth, income, empowerment,
Exactly.
come out better as a country. But it requires all of us to let go of some things and then come together to work on something. So I think that is really, how we can make a difference.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think I 100% agree with that. कि I think वो इंसान का self interest होता है कि how मेरा इसमें क्या है, what is in it for me. But I think that has to be always connected to कि जब तक आप पूरी community को और अपने साथ वालों को लेकर नहीं चलोगे, then it's also always going to be very short term. I think you hit the nail on the head at the start, Hira, where you talked about कि हमारा self interest और जो thinking है बहुत short term होती है. अगले 6 महीने में, अगले साल में कैसे जो है वो मैं पैसे बना लूं या मैं sort of कैसे profit generate कर लूं, अगले 10 साल का किसने देखा है, right? And that's the kind of thinking that we kind of need to get rid of if we want to really go global. आप अगर या तो एक तो कम्युनिटी की भी बात कर रही हैं और फिर साथ साथ अपने सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट की भी बात कर रही हैं, both of things kind of align together. I personally feel if you want to really create massive impact as well as generate wealth at a massive level. Otherwise, अगर आप अपने self interest में ही रहेंगे, तो then you're going to sort of continue to be stuck in the same कुआं, for lack of a better phrase, right? I think you are completely right कि दो तीन चीजें जिस तरह sort of we have startups. I think we have the tech actually now and the ability to maybe create early warning systems for flooding for communities as well. We don't personally need to rely on the Met department or the government to make those announcements. If we have that ability, we can do that, and already वो हमारे crops के लिए भी बेहतर होगा. So that has actually commercial value. I think अभी भी apps आई थी. I remember like Telenor working on it and a couple of other organizations as well, जहाँ weather updates वगैरह farmers के लिए directly जा रही थी. If we can scale that up, then that has commercial value too, and then you can use it for disaster sort of prevention as well. Similarly, जो आप water की बात कर रही हैं, I think water availability is a major issue as well. I think even this, after the flooding, one thing I've clearly seen is कि clean water पीने को नहीं है. ठीक है, इन्हीं इलाकों में जहाँ floods भी आए हैं. And I remember I was speaking to someone from the diplomatic corps in Islamabad who were mentioning that they've brought in water pumps जो कि जनाब पानी रिसाइकल करते हैं, लोगों को पीने का पानी दे रहे हैं. But they said that they're going to take those away. They're only going to be there for 2 or 3 months, और जब period खत्म हो जाएगा तो वो ले जाएंगे. And I was wondering, why can't we develop these locally? I don't see that there's no rocket science behind it. If we can do the same thing with ventilators, and that's the kind of I think drive that's needed. And that again, all of these things have commercial value. But just generally, I think there's just need to a greater ability to take risk to be able to do that. And just one final thought from my side on this. I personally feel like something that I've worked on for some time are like carbon markets, which is a very tangible example of how we can create value for Pakistan. I can tell you कि जो clean cooking के projects हैं in East Africa that I've worked on, एक जो कुक स्टोव है उसकी वैल्यू थी तकरीबन $3.5-4, राइट. उसके जरिए जो थे लोगों को कुकिंग के सॉल्यूशंस मिल रहे थे. बट उसका अगर आप एक कार्बन क्रेडिट मार्केट में बेचने जाते हैं, तो दे वर एबल टू जनरेट $7 to $8 पर कुक स्टोव इन एडिशन. तो जो उसकी कॉस्ट थी वो मोर देन डबल हो गई थी बाय कार्बन क्रेडिट्स, जो कि ये बड़ी कंपनीज बाय कर रही थी, द लाइक्स ऑफ गूगल, Amazon, they were all investing in them. So I mean, Pakistan is that sort of opportunity where अगर एग्री में हम चीजें चेंज करते हैं, अपना हम मिनी ग्रिड्स पे आते हैं, कम्युनिटी जिनको एनर्जी एक्सेस नहीं है, हम स्टोर्स की बात करते हैं, there's plenty of funding available from the private sector. We don't need to rely on the likes of GCF, on government support, but it's just about being able to. I think it's our job, perhaps the people. I think Hira, you people like me or our organization who have to bring this message to our startup, to our tech ecosystem as well. Okay, there is opportunity available if you move beyond your traditional sort of VC space as well.
Quite an extensive answers of the challenges, all the challenges. I think it's the little step, it's the first step that counts, and once we take that, it's always going to be escalated. जब हम एक दफा नियत कर लेते हैं, जब एक दफा हम start कर लेते हैं किसी चीज की तरफ, तो it gets better. हिरा, मैं आपसे एक सवाल ऐसा जरूर पूछना चाहूंगी कि I think there should be a very clear role of females in this sector as well. You are working and you're doing a great job, then I would and I see less women, like it's obviously it's increasing, even though if I compare it with the previous time, a lot has increased, but I would like you to share your experience regarding, आपका भी काफी experience हो चुका है इस पूरी चीज में. What's the role of females as an engineer, as scientist, as a businesswoman? How can we make it better?
I think that देखिए role सबसे most important ये है कि you're giving another world view, right? So no two people are the same. इसी तरह से two genders are not the same. हमारी problem solving approach एक अलग तरीके की है. The men think in a different way. Their problem solving is completely different. But to get the balance, we need to have both purviews sitting on the design front, sitting on the discussion front, talking about how we can make things more livable, more consumable. Because ऐसी बात है, आपके बहुत सारे projects या scope of design अगर किसी एक specific challenge को solve करने के लिए है, you can't exactly have a person who is not part of that challenge dealing with it. So within the energy sector, I see a lot changing. There's a lot more women coming in. There are and interestingly, a lot more women now at leadership positions in companies. They've worked their way up. Challenge हमारा हमेशा lower level पे रहेगा. Lower level पे इस तरह से कि we spoke about mindset earlier, and so it's like some of the girls that I speak to in energy companies, वो ये कहते हैं कि हम field पे जाकर as project manager या as a engineer, when we are supervising something, जो low level labor या contractors या things like that, जो लोग काम कर रहे हैं, हम अगर कुछ कहते हैं तो हमें सीरियसली नहीं लेते या इग्नोर कर देंगे. बट मेरा अगर प्रोजेक्ट असिस्टेंट या कॉन्ट्रैक्टर वही चीज कहेगा तो इट्स लाइक बाबा सर ने क्या बात कर दी, राइट? एंड समबडी who maybe 2-3 years junior, so it's not so I mean, women have a role, and this is not just true for Pakistan. I think this is true for all countries in general. खवातीन को एक्सेप्ट करना, उनकी सीनियरिटी को एक्सेप्ट करना. But yes, what I also see is that a lot of the girls that have been part very actively of the women in energy and the women in climate space, उनको जिस तरह से the scholarship and the opportunities they've gone to go to other countries, and वहाँ पे जो अब उनके लिए open access हो गई है, and a lot of other governments, communities and countries are actually पाकिस्तानी खवातीन के काम के बेसिस के ऊपर दुनिया भर में अपनी acknowledgements मनवा रही हैं. And there is one girl who I think she's done something in plastics and waste management from Sweden. Right now she's actually one expert in the European sector कि जब waste और plastics और polymers की जब बात हो रही है, circular economy की बात हो रही है, people actually reaching out to her. So for me it's actually a very proud moment कि आपकी किसी से interaction होती है 2-3 better, like maybe 3-4 years back. Or at that time she was asking me, मैं ये पढ़ने जा रही हूँ, what are the opportunities that are there, and now after 4 years I see somebody that I had a brief conversation with to be known as, and like experts in the field are actually saying gee that girl, and she's from Pakistan. So I think role of females in the energy sector, in the climate space, any which way, it's there's a lot that can happen. The thing is हम कितना चाहते हैं कि हो, जितना अलाउ करेंगे उतना ज़्यादा होगा, as simple as that. So for example, I mean, that's why I love DSG Energy. I've never spoken to, I think, except one event जिसपे Daniel was there himself. I've never spoken to any man in the organization. It's always projects are being run by women, so I think it's a really amazing thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are the part of the system. We are at the receiving end as well, and we should participate just like the male gender. We are the responsible end as well, and that's why I wanted to include this as the part of discussion. So although we have discussed a lot, it was quite an informative session. But I would like each of you to share your final thoughts, the final message that we can convey to the entire mass. Over to you, Hassan.
Hassan, I'll let you go first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Please. No, I think it was, on the last point, I think it was really great to hear from Hira as well on the role of women in energy. I think it's absolutely wonderful the work that Women in Energy Forum is doing. In fact, at PET, my personal experience has been that out of the 13 people we have at the organization, 8 are women, and all of them, like right down from the director to the analyst level. I mean, there's a lot of participation of women at the organization, but it's also a lot of it is just how much more opportunities are coming up. And I think to Hira's point, I mean, it's 50% of the population. How can you leave 50% of the population out of the planning and the design stage? Which is the
Yeah.
reason why we end up with such disasters, is because you've been cutting half of your population out of the decision making process.
Bilkul.
So obviously, then you're going to end up with the situation, the mess we find ourselves in. Uh, but in terms of sort of last thoughts, I think the situation is quite bleak. There's no two ways about it. Being very honest, right? I mean, and the current disaster we face right now in Pakistan. I mean, I have a colleague based in DA Khan. We have a project that we're sort of trying to implement there, and more than 80% of that district has been underwater for some time. And this really puts it into stark sort of perspective for us, that how disastrous the situation is and where it's going, but also globally as well. Whether it's Pakistan, whether we're talking about wildfires in California or Australia, the world is going, literally towards disaster and hurtling towards it quite quickly. But as Pakistanis, I think it is quite important for us to, number one, acknowledge the position we find ourselves in, but also acknowledge the fact that we have the power to be able to change our current situation. We do not have to wait for the world to take notice, to give us the funding or the resources to be able to adapt. I think it is in our control. A lot of the measures that Hira and I spoke about, I think, and we touched upon, are some things that we can do locally, like whether it's water की management है, या crops की या agricultural sector की adaptation है. Those are things we can do globally. Those just require policy shifts. And thirdly, I think we need to look at it. When I look at the industrial sector, we need to look at this as an opportunity. The global transition as an opportunity for Pakistan to take lead, for our industrial sector, if we can adapt. And because we have a low base, we can adapt quickly, is to adapt to the global demand and take a lead, whether it's in the form of service provision or whether it's in the form of sort of providing goods delivery. I think there is massive opportunity for us as well to focus on external factors. But Hira, over to you, I
Yeah.
guess.
So I think pretty much very valid and simple points that Hassan has covered up. I'm practically क्या कर सकते हैं इससे ज़्यादा तो कुछ नहीं. But if we start doing things today, one, collectively realizing the challenges that we're facing, how can we all come together to start working on them, and then realizing that as an individual or within my lifetime nothing changes, but at least set something up. Like we started talking about these things in conversation. My first project on clean energy, clean water was in 2010. Started in 2011, 12 तक चला. December 2010 में approval आई थी, and 11, 12 में पूरा project चलाए. We put up solar water system to support village communities for clean drinking water. So about 5,000 people across some locations within Punjab. But from there on, I see the world has changed. The acceptability of clean technologies, the acceptability of business even having this conversation. Like recently, there was a conference on energy that was actually hosted by Unilever. And the first and foremost question is that as a company, Unilever is in the FMCGs, sabun, shampoo, chai,
Yeah.
noodles and ketchup. उनका एनर्जी से क्या ताल्लुक है? बहुत मैसिव ताल्लुक है. If they want to improve their production, if they want to improve the way they're doing business, if they want to improve their bottom line, they need to adapt or to move on to some opportunities that will be clean, that will be green, that in the long term. And their challenge is that within the constraints of a company, it's not possible. They can't do it alone. They need all the companies to be there together. They need the communities to be there together. They need the government to be there together. And literally, to make that happen, if you have to give an entire day, 4 hours of programming space to a regulatory authority, that really means there's something lacking, in our enabling systems. So our enabling
Yeah.
systems need to change. Yeah. And I think the only way that can happen is if we get the right kind of people on board. If you all take it as a responsibility कि हमने individually नहीं, but even for the long term prosperity of the country, of the world, because the world's ecosystem will collapse if we don't do something about it. It's not just about Pakistan or Asia; it's about the whole world really surviving through the upcoming challenges. So yeah, then we need to practically start implementing things with that long term purview in mind. You know,
Yeah.
so that's it.
Uh, वैसे तो you guys have covered almost everything that could be shared or that could be discussed. Quite an impressive discussion. But just as the last thing, that I think the biggest misconception here would be like zero is the answer. So just like we cannot have zero carbon in the atmosphere, we cannot have zero greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But at the same time, zero solution is not the answer itself. So we can start it and we can do something about it, even if it's just planting one tree in our lifetime. So I think that's one of the participation as well. So it's not a one nation's job, it's not a one man's job. We are all here, we are all living, we are all suffering. And we have like this world one, I think is saal ka jo world environment day tha, the basic idea behind that we have got only one earth. So I guess we have to do something to make this earth, make this world like worth surviving for, worth living in. So thank you so much for joining. Just one that Hira talked about, one thing that I would like to initiate that, or I would like to talk about it, that if DSG Energy has a separate CSR initiative as well. We run an eco squad system के नाम से भी do a CSR initiative. So if in the immediate future or sometime in the future the DSG Energy stimulus or Pakistan Environment Trust could collaborate something to make to participate some in any way possible towards the fight against the climate change, that would be great. I thank you both of you. I missed the third guest that she has some emergency, family emergency, she couldn't join us, but I'll be looking forward to host her in our next session inshallah taala. But thank you so much both of you for joining us, for giving us your expertise, your knowledge. It was quite an impressive, quite an informative session. And I guess अगर एक बंदा भी अपने mindset में, अपने lifestyle में हम में से कोई change ले आए, so I guess our work would be done. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for watching and joining whoever joined us. बहुत शुक्रिया, and we will be back with the other webinars. If you have some suggestions that we can use as a topic, as a new discussion area, that would be really helpful. We would be grateful for your input. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Till then, Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.
Thank
Allah
you.
Hafiz.
Pleasure.
Allah
Allah
Hafiz.
Hafiz.